Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the graduation of the School of Medicine's class of 1983. Will you please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Joint Armed Services Color Guard, and please remain standing both for the national anthem, which will be sung by Second Lieutenant Ronald L. Gelzer, United States Army, and the following invocation delivered by Second Lieutenant Cindy Lee Burns, United States Army.
On this special day of achievement and celebration, I ask that you join me for a prayer. Let us bow our heads. Lord, we thank you for the privilege to stand before you today, knowing it is you who made us and not we ourselves. Thank you for the freedom to be who we are, for the inspiration to be more, for the confidence that we can do much, for the renewed desire to reach our potential, for the willingness to acknowledge our needs, for the greater awareness of the needs and potentials of others, for all that you have meant to each of us. We are grateful for your awesome supply of blessings and the abundant life you make possible. As written in a Psalm of David, Lord, you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. We pray these things through the power given to us in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Retire the colors. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to introduce to you the student officer who has been president of the class of 1983 for the past 3 years. As his last official act in his present grade, Second Lieutenant Robert Peter Cadillac, United States Air Force, will introduce Ensign Michael Eugene Nellestein, United States Navy, who will deliver the reflections of the class of 1983. Upon the conclusion of his classmates' remarks, Lieutenant Cadillac will present the class's farewell.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on behalf of the class of 1983. It is certainly a great thrill for us today to be seated before you to accept our diplomas in front of our families and friends. But at this time, I'd like to introduce Ensign Michael Nellestein, who will provide us with some reflections of our past 4 years. Mike?
Wow. Mr. President, Regents of the University, ladies and gentlemen, and my esteemed colleagues. As historian of the class of 1983, it is my task to give a concise and yet entertaining account of our activities over the past 4 years. This task is not a simple one, because thorough histories are invariably mercilessly boring, while entertaining histories always run the risk of having too many long-winded inside jokes. At least they have in the past. Since I've been assured of getting the hook if this speech runs over 10 minutes, you needn't fear a moment-by-moment account of the last 1,373 days. On the other hand, if there is any confusion about the inside jokes, just refer to the libretto for translations. For those of you out here visiting Wade from Montana, a libretto is a text of words used in an opera. An opera is this musical production. It's pretty fancy. The Uniformed Services University was founded in 1972 with the express purpose of producing a highly trained cadre of career medical officers. More importantly, USU was founded with the implicit purpose of bridging the yawning gap between the military life and the medical life. USU was meant to stand as did the Colossus of Rhodes, linking those forever separate shores with Asclepius the healer on one bank and Mars the healer on the other. This modern Colossus was to have no trouble reconciling the quest for the health and dignity of his patients for the below-the-zone selections of every meeting of the promotions board. The class of 1983 is composed of 120 some odd people, and I do mean odd. It is difficult for me to be precise on the exact number of graduates also because the Amway distributorship matching selections hasn't yet quite made. There's also a great deal of difficulty, and it arises, I think, because of the tremendous similarity between the study of medicine and the study of history. General Santana summed it up well when he said that, quote, "Those who do not study it will be condemned to repeat it." End quote. We all came to USU from many walks of life. Some of us came to medical school after 4 years of rigorous academics in undergraduate school, while others of us came to USU after 4 years of rigorous academics in undergraduate school. And then there were the Service Academy graduates. Having arrived on campus and sorted through the exacting details of our medical curriculum, we settled in for 4 long years of hunting for mortgage money, buying new cars, getting married, and finally resolving that nasty slice which for so long plagued the tee shot. Thank goodness for the 4th year. Anyway, the first 2 years were a wild and confusing time. We were given a lot of books and lectures which at the time seemed to have something to do with medicine. And we had a course in neuroanatomy which had nothing to do with medicine. In addition, we students of USU were given instruction intended to prepare us for the particular demands imposed by careers in military medicine. These courses dealt with several subjects, many germane topics, such as the thermonuclear battlefield and medical planning. How many tongue blades is enough? Or even more interesting was the topic flight surgery. How to perform a bowel resection after the fasten seatbelt sign is lighted. Look for that Samsonite luggage. Look for that briefcase. Always pack a trait kit in your sock. Because when the wheels are in the well, it's too late for that heads up. The common thread which ran through all of these lectures in military medicine can be summed up in just one word: stress. You want to talk about stress? But stressful or not, these courses provided us with a clarity of vision and a singularity of purpose which can only be likened to camping in the Shenandoah Mountains under that starry sky, in each other's arms. God, it was beautiful. The 3rd and 4th years, also known as the clinical years, were our opportunity to apply all that we had learned in the years of academics. Launched into the tempestuous waters of hospital patient care, we had to marshal all of our resources and training in order to master the most essential challenge which faces any physician in training. That being to conceal your abject ignorance and terror behind the flimsy shield of ill-informed guesses and arrogant supposition. These clinical years were also our opportunity to sample the various fields of medicine so that we might make more informed career choices. To a great extent, by this time most of us have already chosen what we will go into. Some will be surgeons, others internists. Still others will be psychiatrists, pediatricians, or obstetricians. And yet others will reach directly into their community as highly trained Amway distributors. Our clinical years would have seemed incomplete had not the university taken the opportunity to reinforce those elements of our training which are the domain of the military medical officer. This was embodied in the course entitled Military Contingency and Emergency Medicine, designed to address the practicalities of healthcare in the combat environment. I came away from that rotation having learned medical skills which I will carry throughout my career, such as how to pitch a tent in a driving rainstorm, how to hold your breath in a field expedient latrine, following the direct orders of Army corporals, and how to say turn your head and cough in Spanish. But enough about the curriculum and philosophy of our school. What about the people who bring life to those hallowed halls? You friends and loved ones here today know the students more completely than my description could presume to picture. But what do you know about our faculty? Do you know about Colonel Robert Joy, our mentor in military medicine and history? Colonel Joy is without a doubt the most knowledgeable physician and understanding man I have ever met. And if we can grow up to be just half the person and doctor that he is, I think we'll make outstanding physicians. And what do you know about Captain Margulies? You don't know Captain Margulies? You didn't do your homework. You didn't study up. Just something for future use. File it away. Keep track of it. And what have our educators taught us during these 4 years? Certainly we have learned the facts, methods, and techniques which are recognized as the science of medicine. But we have learned more. We have learned the value of compassion and equanimity, to hear all the facts before making vital decisions, to shun hearsay, trusting only to what we know is true. We have been taught to support our comrades no matter how dark the hour or how grave the circumstance. They have taught us that in order to succeed as physicians, we must seek out the truth, not in the manner of a witch hunt, but in the open light of day. After all, we are physicians who support the forces of liberty and the rights of the individual, and therefore we must stand squarely against the true foes of freedom, namely innuendo, distortion, and lie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for those stirring words. Now, if I may have my chance at it, oh, by the way, I am an Academy grad, Mike, so you're looking for me down the road here. Well, let me just say again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor and privilege to be the representative of the class of 1983, to say farewell to our university, its staff, its faculty, and to share some feelings and thoughts with our loved ones and our friends. Mike has given a more lighthearted look and entertaining look at some of the events and personalities that made our experience at USU a memorable one. Unfortunately, our 4 years here have not always been so enjoyable or so humorous. We have navigated through the best and worst of times together, not unscathed. We all have reminders of our demanding educational process and our rites of passage. But with the challenges and difficulties presented, we worked hard to earn what we proudly now celebrate, and we celebrate with joy and satisfaction of a job well done. As we have reached this peak in our lives, we have grown together in an appreciation for our university and those who devote themselves to it and to its important mission. Whatever the circumstances of life we find ourselves in, we will always share a common bond with our class and our university. Today, we also reaffirm our commitment to the service of our nation and to the profession of medicine. Since our first day at USU, we have gained in perspective the depth of our responsibilities in our future profession, and we are proud in our accomplishments. We all, however, now share the same trepidations of the demands of internship and the sadness of leaving friends and familiar surroundings. While there is a sense of humility about our abilities as new physicians, we leave today with a spark of confidence as a result of our training and experience at USU. To this we are truly grateful. Grateful, and to those who contributed to our personal and professional growth. On this occasion, we'd like to recognize and thank them. It is difficult to identify or cite any individual, but we'd just like to say to the people of the university administration, military personnel, the library, MDL, finance, travel, and even the copying center people who helped us keep the paperwork moving, that they were very helpful in making our jobs easier and also our lives a little bit more enjoyable for knowing them. And to our faculty, we'd also like to say thank you too, because it is you who have shared your knowledge and experience with us and provided us with direction and instruction through the basic and clinical sciences. We are indeed in debt to you. A special word of thanks go to all those who made our graduation what we have enjoyed so far and what we shall always remember. In particular, Dr. Sabiston, our guest speaker today, Dean Sanford, and Dr. Bullard, for all their patience and assistance, and to the Class of 1983 Graduation Committee under the direction of Bob Lyons. Last, we would like to thank you, all of you in the audience, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, spouses, grandparents, aunts, uncles, children, friends, all of you who have shared in the dream of this day and who have given us support and encouragement along the way. We appreciated the occasional pat on the back for the jobs well done, and equally appreciated and sometimes sorely needed the swift kick in the pants to get us on the track again. Certainly without you, we could not properly celebrate the true joy of this occasion. We also remember those special to us who could not be here today for whatever reason. We rest assured that they're here now in spirit with us. And if I may direct my last remarks to my classmates, first I would like to say it has been a great privilege for me and a great opportunity to serve my classmates these past few years. And I would like to wish you good luck on this occasion, but luck is simply when preparation meets opportunity. We are well prepared for what faces us in the future, and now the opportunity awaits us. So my classmates, ladies and gentlemen, God bless, goodbye, and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now present Dr. J.P. Sanford, President of the Uniformed Services University and Dean of the School of Medicine, who will preside during the presentation of the awards. Dr. Sanford.
Colonel Wellen, thank you very much. It is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable David Olch, Chairman of the Board of Regents, who will present the Board of Regents Award, the Association of Military Surgeons of the United States Award, the William P. Clements Jr. Award, and the Outstanding Civilian Educator Award. Dr. Olch, if you could come forward and the Board of Regents Award is the highest honor a graduating senior can receive. Lieutenant Voss, would you please come forward? The recipient of this award has a truly outstanding academic performance and has shown the concern and care for patients, the investment in the social and intellectual aspects of medicine, and the devotion, empathy, dedication, and personal commitment required of a physician. He has proven his capability for hard work, both as an individual and as a team member, and he has performed at the highest levels of duty and honor expected of a commissioned officer. The Board of Regents, with pride in his accomplishments and with confidence for an outstanding future career, is pleased to make its award for 1983 to Second Lieutenant Kevin Hal Voss, United States Air Force Medical Service Corps. Congratulations. The Association of Military Surgeons of the United States has established an award to be given annually to the graduate of the Uniformed Services University School of Medicine. The award consists of a lifetime membership in the association, a plaque, and a token award of cash. Second Lieutenant Tenlin, would you please come forward? The Association of Military Surgeons of the United States Award is presented to the graduating senior who has best demonstrated the highest qualities of leadership and academic involvement. Lieutenant Tenglin has demonstrated concern and commitment to the health of people and care of the sick and injured. He possesses the social and interpersonal skills required to gain the respect, trust, and confidence of patients, superiors, peers, and subordinates. With pride in his accomplishments and confidence for an outstanding future career, on behalf of the Association of Military Surgeons, the Board of Regents is pleased to present this award for 1983 to Second Lieutenant Richard Charles Tenglin, Medical Service Corps, USU. The next award, the William P. Clements Jr. Award, is given annually at each of the service academies to that uniformed faculty member chosen by the students as their best teacher. The award, donated privately, bears the name of a public servant, former governor of the state of Texas, who during his tenure as Deputy Secretary of Defense had a keen interest in the education of those who serve the nation and was instrumental in the implementation that were necessary to establish this institution. Colonel Harry C. Holloway, Medical Corps, United States Army, was chosen as this year's recipient of the Clements Award as the Uniformed Services faculty member whose personal example and performance best characterized the principles of excellence in education. Colonel Holloway has consistently sought to inspire students to high levels of academic accomplishment in his role as chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at our university. Colonel Holloway, the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, takes pleasure in instilling the decision of its students by bestowing upon you the William P. Clements Award. The citation reads, "You are a physician who combines professional skill with integrity, compassion, and respect for the patient. You have, by your conduct and teaching, led your students to aspire to these same qualities. Your selection assures you of an honored place in the university's tradition of academic excellence and devotion to the nation's service." Barry. The Outstanding Civilian Educator Award is given annually to that civilian faculty member chosen by the students as the individual who has most effectively conveyed academic excellence, intellectual stimulation, and dedication to students. Donald O. Castell, former professor of medicine, was chosen as this year's recipient. Dr. Castell, would you please come forward? Dr. Castell is an acknowledged leader in digestive diseases who has continued to challenge and inspire students to reach for excellence. His stimulating lectures are complemented by his compassion for patients and their families, his ability and availability to individual students for counsel, direction, and friendly encouragement. Dr. Castell's wide-ranging scholarly interests have broadly influenced this university, but it is his warm personal relationships to the students which has led to his selection. Their nomination concludes with the following words: "Dr. Castell, the students give you this award with great pleasure and respect. We are sure that future recipients will be honored to share the Civilian Faculty Award for Excellence in Education with you." members and families of the class of 1983, distinguished flag officers, guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to introduce your 1983 commencement speaker, Dr. David C. Stavison, Jr., the James Buchanan Duke Professor of Surgery and Chairman of the Department of Surgery at Duke University. Medicine in the United States has reached its high level of achievement through its foundation in compassionate yet skilled patient care, research, both basic discovery and its translation into prevention and treatment, and thirdly, education, the process which assures that the experience of the past do not require rediscovery. In his career, Dr. Stavison has continued to excel in each of these three areas: patient care, research, and teaching. He is a North Carolinian who graduated from the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. He stayed at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in the Department of Surgery under Dr. Blaylock, becoming chief resident surgeon in 1952. The subsequent year, he came on active duty in the Army and was assigned to the Army Medical Service Graduate School, now known as the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. This is when I first met Dave. Interestingly, Dr. Stavison, having been trained in surgery, was assigned to the Department of Medicine in cardiopulmonary diseases, while I, at the time, having been trained in medicine, was assigned to the Department of Experimental Surgery. At that time, it was apparent to all of us that Dr. Stavison represented then, as he has subsequently, the future of surgery. Dr. Stavison has been one of this country's strongest and most effective advocates in the area of excellence in surgery and in military medicine. In 1964, he was selected as professor and chairman of surgery at Duke. Review of all of his academic achievements and recognition would take far too long, but I shall mention a few. He has just been elected chairman of the Board of Regents of the American College of Surgeons. He has been president of the American Surgical Association, the Society of University Surgeons. He has served as chairman of the American Board of Surgery. He is an honorary member of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. He is a member of the Institute of Medicine of the National Academy of Sciences. He is an author of almost 300 scientific papers and is editor of the textbook of surgery, the Davis Christopher text. His abilities as a teacher are reflected in his receipt of the Outstanding Teacher Awards from students at Duke in 1966, 1976, 1977, 1981, and 1982. At the same time, he maintains an active surgical practice, being one of the outstanding cardiothoracic surgeons in the world. His being with us today required major revisions in his schedule, but it reflects his commitment to education, to the military medical services, and specifically to us, the Uniformed Services, University of the Health Sciences. I present Dr. David Stavison. Dave.
Thank you, President Sanford, for those exceedingly generous remarks. Members of the graduating class of 1983, distinguished participants on the platform, members of the Board of Regents, the faculty, the families and friends of the graduates here today, let me say how much I appreciate the invitation. And when President Sanford contacted me about being the speaker at this commencement, I was very happy indeed. Happy because the invitation was extended by you, the members of the graduating class. Quite frankly, it would be difficult to overstate my deep appreciation to you for this generous tribute. It has been a privilege for me to have had the opportunity to participate in a small way in the early planning of this school and to serve as the chairman of one of the faculty selection committees. It is surely a fact and quite safe to say that never has a medical school progressed so rapidly and to such a high standard as the USUHS, and it has achieved it in just 7 short years. The quality of the faculty and the excellence of the students and the extraordinary physical facilities constructed in Bethesda have established a new and astonishing record in the history of medical schools in this country and abroad. There have been many who have contributed to this effort, beginning with Congressman Hebert from Louisiana, who worked tirelessly to have the legislation passed by the Congress, and then Mr. Packard, General Heaton, Dr. Carreri, and a number of others. It's also clear that the thoughtful planning of another individual is greatly responsible for the high quality which characterizes this school today. This man, your president and dean, is recognized throughout the country and abroad as a dedicated scholar in academic medicine, a brilliant investigator, an outstanding clinician, an acknowledged teacher, and superb administrator. It is his broad base, both in depth and breadth, which is surely responsible for J. Sanford's success in this very worthy undertaking. The nation owes him deep debt of gratitude, first for establishing these standards of excellence here, and then for achieving these goals in a great school in which the entire country can take deep and lasting pride. The primary reason for this remarkable success has been the attraction of a faculty of national standing, as well as a student body of the highest level. It's been my privilege to know a number of your faculty personally and as friends, as well as many others through their reputations. Doctors Norman Rich, James Leonard, Francis Hattie, Peter Olch, Harry Shoemaker are a few of them with whom I have had considerable interaction both here at the school and on the national level. The members of the faculty represent the highest echelon of medical leadership in the country. The other important aspect of the success of this school lies in the quality and the academic background of the students. The class today of 121 graduates was selected from a group of 3,733 applicants. Moreover, in reviewing the schools from which you graduated, one recognizes that they represent those which would be found in the top-ranked medical schools in this nation today. It's remarkable to note the tremendous progress since the opening of the school in 1976. The first class had 32 students, and progressive growth has resulted in the fact that next year there will be 156 students in the entering class. Before beginning my remarks to you this afternoon, let me cite a story which I recently heard about another commencement speaker. On that occasion, the speaker gave a very dull address, and as time passed, the audience became rather restless. And on the platform were a group of dignitaries, as we have today, and there were several microphones around in front of them through which some of these individuals had spoken briefly a few minutes earlier. As the commencement speaker droned on, the gentleman on the platform nearest the speaker went to sleep. His chin dropped, and in a short time he began to snore. It so happened that one of the microphones was immediately in front of him, and the president became a little bit irritated and went over to try to remove the microphone, but found that it was bolted to the floor. He was puzzled for a moment. He walked over to the lectern, picked up the gavel, walked behind the snoring gentleman, and hit him on the head. Whereupon this gentleman could be very audibly heard throughout the auditorium to say, "Hit me again, I can still hear him." Well, let's hope for a little bit different situation this afternoon, and I do want to make a few remarks to you about the past, present, and future of medicine. This is a big topic, and we shall only take up selected parts of it. And in emphasizing some of the significant features from our medical past, it's important to recognize that success and happiness in life are usually experienced together. I'd like to briefly describe some of the individuals who have been very important in medicine and some of their specific contributions, and with each contributor to cite a special feature or characteristic which led to the successful outcome. First, in the year 1809, a country doctor in Kentucky, Ephraim McDowell, was called to see a seriously ill patient who lived 60 miles away in the state of Indiana. By horseback, Dr. McDowell went to the bedside of this Mrs. Crawford, who was suffering from a very large abdominal tumor. At that time, no patient had ever had a successful removal of an abdominal tumor, and this was carefully explained to Mrs. Crawford. But she insisted that something be done if at all possible, and Dr. McDowell explained to her that she could have an operation, but equally explained the risk that it might be for her life. After much consideration, Mrs. Crawford traveled with Dr. McDowell back to Danville, Kentucky, where Dr. McDowell took her to his home. In his home, he made preparations for the operation, and in the meantime, a number of the townspeople in the village heard about his plan and thought the likelihood of Mrs. Crawford surviving this procedure was very small. In fact, they really thought that McDowell had in mind a human experiment, and they threatened to attack him should his patient die during or after the operation. Nevertheless, on Christmas Day of 1809, with a throng of antagonistic people waiting outside, Ephraim McDowell operated on Mrs. Crawford and removed a 15-pound ovarian tumor. 5 days later, she was up and around, making up her own bed, and 20 days later went home and lived a very long and normal life thereafter. With that landmark achievement, that is the first successful abdominal operation ever performed in the world, McDowell's success was clearly related to one word, and that was courage, and it took plenty of it, great courage. Another example is Madame Curie. As many of you know, she was the first to discover the radioactive element polonium. Although working in France, she named it for her native country of Poland. Not satisfied with the strength and curative abilities of this particular radioactive element, she pursued intense research in a small, poorly equipped laboratory until she discovered radium. This discovery and subsequent development of radioactive compounds has completely altered the entire field of medical diagnosis and treatment, and it has clearly been responsible for the saving of millions of lives. Thus, due to Marie Curie's tireless work under difficult circumstances, she was able to achieve discoveries that will forever benefit mankind. Her success was due to another key principle, determination. Determination until her goal was reached. It's tragic that her work, coming in contact with so many radioactive compounds, ultimately led to her death from leukemia. Another example of a medical pioneer is that of Dr. Luther Hill of Montgomery, Alabama. On a September night in 1902, he was called to a farmhouse 9 miles from the city to see a young man who'd been stabbed 5 times in the chest. When Dr. Hill arrived, the patient was unconscious, gasping for breath, and almost dead. Although no operation for a stab wound had ever been attempted in the United States, Dr. Hill was a very conscientious doctor and kept up with the latest medical literature by reading the medical journals from around the world. In fact, he had just recently read the details of a patient with a stab wound to the heart operated upon in Germany. Therefore, as serious as the patient's condition was that night, and with the poorest facilities imaginable, he placed this young man on the kitchen table of the cabin at about midnight, and with the aid only of 2 kerosene lamps, opened this young man's chest, exposed the heart, closed the bleeding wound in it, and the patient recovered and was found quite normal 50 years later, having made a very fine recovery. Thus, Dr. Hill's success was very clearly related to the fact that he continued to keep up. He continued to update himself about advancing knowledge, even though it was difficult to do so, particularly in those days. The moral then, of course, in this situation, as you can easily perceive, remains keep abreast of the most recent activities in the newer knowledge of one's field, no matter what it may be. There's an additional point here deserving of emphasis about Dr. Hill. After graduation from medical school, he decided that he wanted to be a surgeon and wanted to seek the best surgical training available in the world at that time. So for that reason, he went to London and worked under Joseph Lister, the father of antiseptic principle in surgery. After he completed his training under Lister, Hill returned to his native Alabama to enter practice. Today, one cannot mention the name of Hill in the United States without recognizing its more recent pertinence in the field of medicine. Dr. Luther L. Hill's son, Lister, whom Dr. Hill named for his great teacher, Joseph Lister, was first sent to the United States Congress from Alabama at the age of 28 and was later elected to the United States Senate. He was the original author of the Hill-Burton Act for the construction of hospitals, together with his strong support of medical research through institutions such as the National Institutes of Health. He deserves credit more than anyone else for bringing the United States to the first place in medicine among the nations of the world. Lister Hill served in Congress for 45 years and was consistently a champion of medical education and the health of this country. Helen Keller said of him, and I quote, "My heart grows warm every time I think of you, Senator Hill, and that is ever so often," end of quote. In March of 1968, an appreciation dinner was held for Senator Hill here in Washington, and it was my privilege to be in attendance. At the dinner, it was said of him, and I quote, "Let no one doubt for even a moment that this great man has done more for the building of hospitals in this country than anyone in history." The President said of him that evening, "If anyone could be called the father of our nation's health, it would be Lister Hill." And I think all of this came then from a very strong interest in medicine, even though he went into law and subsequently into the nation's service, that he got from his father, who is indeed a fine role model. Let me now mention to you another example, a major medical discovery made by an intern, a surgical intern. He conceived the idea that if you could pass a catheter up the arm and into the heart, one could make many diagnoses of heart conditions then not possible. He was convinced that his idea would work and therefore sought volunteers from medical students. But he wasn't able to get one to take him up on it. Since no medical student came forth, this gentleman, Forsman, contacted one of his co-interns and said, "Look, you know, if you let me do this, you'll instantly become successful and be a figure in world medical history." And so he agreed to do that. But the professors heard about this in the institution and told this young potential volunteer, if you let him do that, when that catheter gets inside the heart, it will set off ventricular fibrillation, cardiac arrest, and you'll die. So the young man went back to Forsman and said, "I regret very much, but I'm going to have to withdraw, having heard this advice." And he said, "Well, would you pass the catheter up my arm then?" And he said, "Yes, I'll be glad to pass it up your arm." So arrangements were made for that to be done. But in the meantime, the professors got in the act again and told this young man, "We've told you what's going to happen. If Forsman dies, you will then be accusable for first-degree murder in the German courts." So once again, he had to go back and withdraw. Well, Forsman by this time was even more convinced of the correctness of his idea and was going to pursue it. So you probably know what he did was to take a scalpel and a mirror, make an incision in his own arm, take the catheter, pass it up the arm, into the chest, into the heart, and he described the sensations. And then he recognized, too, that no one would believe him because no one was there if they said that it was in the heart. So he went upstairs to 3 flights to get a chest x-ray made that would show the catheter in the chest. He describes the arrhythmias that he had going up and coming down the steps, but nevertheless, it was a tremendous tribute. I think you'll all agree that in this situation, it was Forsman's unyielding conviction that his idea was right, which was responsible for this massive achievement and the diagnosis of many thousands of cardiac conditions which would not have been possible without it. I think Churchill must have had something similar in mind while speaking to the graduates at a commencement exercise some years ago in Britain. He said, and I quote him, "Never give in, never give in, never, 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 never. And nothing great or small, large or petty, never give in except to conviction and to good sense." The examples which have just been cited really represent surgical history, and in the lifetime of those here today, the story of modern and contemporary medicine has been written. It's during this period that the giant steps in medicine have been made, including the discovery of antibiotics and chemotherapeutic agents, the advent of open heart surgery, the development of transplantation of tissues and organs, the discovery of chemotherapy for cancer, the development of many forms of diagnostic techniques, including angiocardiography, computed tomography, and the role of radioisotopes in the diagnosis and management of a variety of illnesses. Really astonishing feats achieved in a relatively short time period. As an example of one of these important discoveries, I'd like to illustrate the role of character in the development of the heart-lung machine, an instrument which is really quite complex. And the idea arose in the mind of Dr. John Gibbon while he was a first-year resident working with a very difficult problem, which he knew if he had a heart-lung machine, he would be able to save the patient's life who otherwise died. He and his wife, Maylie, worked for 22 consecutive years developing the heart-lung machine. And then finally, in 1953, he was able to place a young lady in congestive heart failure on the heart-lung machine and to correct the condition, the first in medical history. As one looks at the future of medicine, it's unmistakably clear that the advances characteristic of the first generations and on will undoubtedly continue and flourish as they have in the past. If one were to predict today the basis of sound likelihood of successful accomplishments, I think one would be very apt to include wider use of transplantation of organs and tissues and higher success rates than ever before. The introduction of new agents to retard rejection of organs will probably make this field very secure within the next 5 to 10 years. Similarly, current studies on the use of a totally implantable heart are moving ahead quite rapidly. The work of Dr. DeVries at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City and the temporary success of the implantable heart in Dr. Barney Clark indicate the strong likelihood of further success with this approach. Granting the fact that I might be personally biased about Dr. DeVries and his achievement because he spent 9 years after graduating from medical school in our residency training program before he took the position of being chief of cardiac surgery at the University of Utah, nevertheless, I feel confident that within the next 10 years this will become a real achievement, that it will be developed, and that will be made practical, safe, and relatively inexpensive when considered on a long-term basis. The massive strides which have been made in the reduction of mortality are probably no better emphasized than in the results of military casualties and the improvement in the mortality rate. Stop for a moment and think. During the Civil War, for anyone injured in combat, the mortality was 15%. By World War I, it had fallen to 8%. World War II, 4%. And in the most recent conflict, the Vietnam one, it had fallen below 2%, despite the many improvements that have been made in weaponry in recent years. As we look ahead, one of the most exciting fields, I feel quite confident, is that of nuclear magnetic resonance, which is rapidly approaching the time of widespread clinical trials. This technique will allow physicians to peer within the human body, examining internal organs with the same ease and delicate discrimination with which we can look at the skin, and with the same freedom from any risk or hazard. Such an approach, with no risk to the patient, has up until the present time been only a dream. In the future, it will be possible to visualize the internal equivalents of a flush, or of a discoloration, or even slight enlargement of an internal organ. Moreover, this technique provides for defining tissue chemistry directly, such as detecting the changes in ATP in the heart during a single heartbeat. And, as just recently reported, the use of this technique in differentiating benign from malignant tumors. While it's clear that the expense of nuclear magnetic imaging will be considerable, nevertheless, I think the main way that we will be able to bring the cost of medical care in this nation, such a severe economic problem to us all at the present time, will be an early diagnosis, institution of early treatment to prevent chronic illness. And in this way, I believe we will achieve our cost savings that we all desire. It's your generation which will reap the benefits of these extraordinary advances, and how fortunate indeed you are to be entering your professional careers in this exciting time. In addition to the enthusiasm which the science of medicine generates in all of us, you will be wise to continuously be aware of the great respect in which you are held by the citizens of this nation. National polls have repeatedly shown that medicine ranks at the top of all professions in the minds of our citizens, and is a continuous challenge to to maintain this confidence and to be worthy of it. In his beautiful discourse entitled Eulogy of a Doctor, Robert Louis Stevenson captured this image, I think, extremely well when he said, and I quote him, "There are men and classes of men that stand above the common herd, the soldier, the shepherd not infrequently, the artist occasionally, and rarer still, other callings in life. But the physician almost as a rule. He is the flower of our civilization, and when that stage of man is done, with only to be marveled at in history, he will be thought to have shared but little in the defects of the period and to have most notably exhibited the virtues of the entire race. Generosity he has, such as is possible only to those who practice an art and seldom to those who practice a trade. Discretion he has, tested by 100 secrets. Tact, tried in 1,000 embarrassing situations. And what is more important, Herculean cheerfulness and courage. So it is that the physician brings cheer to the sick room as well as the blessings of healing." End of quote. In summarizing these remarks to you this afternoon,